First up, big thank you to Vladimir and the organization team, and for Johannes and Microsoft for hosting us tonight. I've been to a couple of accessibility meetups in Berlin and also in some other cities, and I'm really glad to be here today and share a bit of my experience with accessibility. I picked this slightly provocative title not to call anyone out for making excuses. I'm very good at making excuses myself. It's more meant to say you should get to a point where it's just so easy to get at least the first 30% of accessibility problems solved. There are just no excuses left. My name is Tim. I'm currently a user experience engineer at ResearchGate, which is just a fancy way of saying a content developer. But I'm working mainly with design and user experience problems rather than business logic. More specifically, I work in the team that builds our internal design system called Nova. And a major part of my work is to create front-end components, building blocks that our product teams use to build different features on ResearchGate. And if you want to improve the accessibility of a big site like ResearchGate, this is a really great position to be in. Because everything you improve in individual components will quickly end up in different places all over the product. Change once and you find it everywhere. We can, for example, establish best practices by enforcing labels for inputs, or by setting appropriate ARIA tags, ARIA properties for tooltips. And I realize that not everyone is in this situation where you have a design system and probably don't need one. But I'm mentioning this because, well, this talk has grown out of my personal experience. I think there are a lot of learnings to be had for everyone, no matter if you're just one person working on a side project, or a small NGO, a startup, or if you're working in a Fortune 500 company. So let's dive right in. In 2017, the Government Digital Service, which is basically the internal digital transformation agency of the UK government, created a really, really bad, inaccessible website. They called it the world's least accessible website. They then proceeded to run a whole bunch of accessibility testing tools against it and analyzed how many of the issues they could find on the site. And the results were quite devastating. The coverage varies wildly between tools, but on average, any accessibility testing tool found only about 30% of the issues. The best one found roughly 40%. Everything beyond this number needs manual testing of some sort. For example, a user study or an accessibility audit. So what does this mean for us in practice if we want to create accessible products? Does this mean automated testing is useless? Well, that's a rhetorical question. Automated testing is not useless. Indeed, I'm convinced it is still quite valuable. Even if it only finds 30% of the issues your product might be facing, those 30% are a great baseline to start from. You still should find those 30% no matter what. And it's also a baseline that you can achieve for any project, no matter if it's a massive web application or your personal blog or some side project. I pulled this quote out of the website for a popular accessibility testing framework called ACTS. I think it does describe the gist of it quite well. Automated testing is empowering, it doesn't require expert knowledge, and it's a huge time saver. Most importantly, once you get the trivial issues out of the way, you can focus on the really important, really difficult stuff. In fact, I would like to read the results of the study by GDS exactly the opposite way. Let's say, through automation, everyone can fix at least 30% of accessibility problems. That's great, that's way better than 0%, which is probably true for a majority of websites. So, when we started to improve the accessibility on ResearchGate, we found a couple of things that worked well for us with regards to automated testing. And these are what I'd like to share with you now the rest of my talk. The first task we focused on was closing our knowledge gap. This is a constant process, it's never finished, not because the web content accessibility guidelines are developing so rapidly, but because as time goes on, you will learn more about your users, your product will evolve, technologies change, and best practices will go along with them. This is not a first step, it's rather a good place to get started with just starting out. So starting with yourself, there are many things you can do to learn about accessibility. First up, get involved in a local community. I'm here tonight because there are many people here with lots more experience than me, people I can learn from. There are lots of online tools as well, online resources, blogs, video courses, articles, and also the official guidelines and white article offering practices. I will provide a list of resources that help us at the end of the presentation, and Vladimir will share that after the meetup. Furthermore, I like to follow some people on the internet and just copy what they did to solve a problem. And last, ask Stanley. Stanley was a UX designer and researcher at my previous job, and in the company he knew the most about accessibility, and I was asking him things all the time. It's where I learned most of what I know today. If you have Stanley at your company, find them and ask them lots of questions. To transfer what you know to your team, there are a couple of things you can do. For example, code reviews are an excellent vehicle to sneak in some suggestions for accessibility improvements here. Or to take a more direct route, you can also give a workshop. This can either be a generic accessibility workshop, like how to use ARIA properties for certain things, or it's really more specific to common issues you're facing in your team. You could even incorporate a session where you collaboratively work out solutions for something. And to have an impact beyond your immediate team, the same tips still apply. Give a code review, give a workshop. Depending on how the organization is structured, this will be more or less straightforward to do. But the most important thing you can probably do on this level is to offer help. Other teams in your organization are struggling with accessibility, offer to sit down with them. Another thing you can do is to talk about what you're doing to improve accessibility. This is not necessarily just about technical knowledge, it's also about creating awareness in the organization that you're actively working on making the product better. For example, if your customer support team is aware, they can give you direct feedback from people using assistive technologies and struggle with your site. Or if senior management is aware, well, they might be able to change priorities around so that you're going to actually spend more time on those issues. Now that you've gained lots of knowledge, it's time to put it to work. You actually want to set up some automated tests. The GDS tested 30, but there are thousands of automated accessibility testing tools. And it's easy to get overwhelmed in the beginning with your amount of choices. The best advice I can give here is to start with what you already know well, and what you're already using in your day-to-day work. For example, if you use Selenium, which is a tool for doing end-to-end UI tests of a website in a real browser, you can use this to test your keyboard accessibility flows. Does the tab order still check out? Can you navigate only by keyboard, etc.? Or you use Google Lighthouse to measure the performance of your site. You can also use Lighthouse's built-in accessibility audits. If you use a tool like Sketch or Figma to design your site, then there are plugins you can use to test color downloads. And if you're already running unit tests, which as a developer you probably are, right? You should see if you can use the same toolkit for also running accessibility tests. In our case at ResearchGate, we looked at what we were using for running tests. We're using Jest, a JavaScript test runner, for our unit tests, integration tests, and visual regression tests. So when it came to setting up accessibility tests, using Jest was the obvious choice. Furthermore, we're using Jenkins for our continuous integration. Every time we make a code change, Jenkins runs all our tests and complains when something's not right. This is crucial for automation, right? Making sure it's run automatically instead of manually. We then looked at the vast amount of automated accessibility libraries. We picked a library called Axe, one that I mentioned before. It has a good reputation, strong company backing it, and it's highly configurable. But what's also quite important is there's a library called Jest Axe, which allows us to run Axe easily within Jest. So you kind of have to do it all together. For you, this slide will probably look quite different. The nice thing is that there will be solutions for most everyone's setup. The open source community, particularly around accessibility, is quite a great resource. But before we see what an actual test will look like, let's highlight the issue we still have with this setup. So Axe will not be able to run color contrast tests. Because in fact, it's just looking at the HTML source that is generated and not at the graphically rendered result. So it's not really seeing what you see in the web browser, it's just seeing the source code behind it. That also means we can't really, well, we can simulate events like keyboard events or mouse events, like pressing the tab key, but we cannot actually have the tab key pressed. What would be great is if we could run these tests in a real browser, but automated. I've mentioned Selenium before. It will basically start up a browser like Firefox or Chrome or Internet Explorer and allow you to send it commands like click here or type this, and then you can make assertions about how your web application responds to that. At ResearchGate, we used Selenium in the past, but we've run into some issues with it. It was rather unstable, would deliver inconsistent results. So we instead adopted a tool called Puppeteer, which is a headless version of Google Chrome. And headless here means that it does all the things a regular web browser does. Downloads resources, parses HTML into a DOM, adds CSS, interprets JavaScript, all the things. It renders and layouts the page, just doesn't show you the user interface. So it does all that without you seeing it. Does not open a window with the web page inside. But instead, you can control it using an API. This is great because we can run it on Jenkins, on our continuous integration server, and we can use our existing Jest test to control it. So at ResearchGate, we have our own custom setup that we've adapted from our visual regression tests. But you can start out with a package called Jest Puppeteer. So you see there's a lot of packages that just kind of do everything together. Jest Axe, Jest Puppeteer, to get the same result. So we can run a test suite with Jest inside Puppeteer using Axe to check for some problems. This slide shows some example test code. This code specifically tests a button with an icon and a text label inside for any accessibility problems. I tweaked the button of our design system to actually have a problem, particularly very low color contrast. At the top here, this is the, can you all see it? It's on the back. It's larger. Okay. This describes the button that we're going to test. This in the middle actually runs the test and checks if there are no issues. And we got a little bit at the bottom as well, which checks that the button's accessible name is really just text from the label and not, for example, also the name of the icon, which means And to the right, you can see what that button actually looks like rendered. I included it also in a big version, because I feared that it would be too small. If we run the test now, the result looks like this. I'm just going to walk through this with you. So first, it states that the element we found at certain selector, in this case just a span, it expected it not to have any violations, and then it prints the HTML that it looks at, but it found violations, and particularly elements must have sufficient color contrast. The nice thing is that it also gives you, at the end, a link to some resources on how to fix this. More information on what the problem actually is with the color contrast and how to make it better. Okay, we can now get good, reliable test results. However, they aren't really worth much if we cannot act on them and actually use them to improve everything. So let's quickly look again at the output we got earlier. So we have a selector here, the span, a piece of HTML. And depending on your setup, if you use web components or just plain server-side templates, it might be easy to make a connection between the source that the developer is writing and the result you're going to get thrown at here. It's easy too when you're testing something very small in isolation, like button. But it gets really difficult once you test larger modules or even whole pages. You get a bunch of HTML, and then you have to look through all the parts of your application and see where does this actually come from. At ResearchGate, we use React, which means there is a level of indirection between the React source code that the developer writes and the HTML that Axe is then actually checking. So how are we supposed to quickly find the precise source of the problem? One solution we came up with in my team is to highlight the problematic element in the browser using a red rectangle and then making a screenshot. Seems pretty straightforward. This was quite easy for us to do because Puppeteer can make screenshots out of the box, and all we added was this mechanism to put the highlight around the element in question. In combination with the terminal output, which lists what kind of problem you have, we can now look at the screenshot and see where exactly the problem is. And of course, there are many ways to improve this in the future. For example, we could write the name of the violation, or the rule that's been violated, right next to the red box. But if we have a visually impaired developer on the team, screenshots don't help anymore. So one way to address this is to make use of source maps, so that we can directly find the source file where this element that we found problems for is defined. There's a lot of potential for improvement, but it's a first step for us that's working quite well. So when you write accessibility tests for your website or for individual components, the first results can be quite overwhelming. Right? Even if your site was designed with the best of intentions, and even though these automated tools only find about 30% of the real issues, those might still be in the hundreds. And my advice here is not to get discouraged by the sheer amount, but take it one issue at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day either. There are two basic strategies that you can go with, I think. Either you focus on a specific section of your site, like the home page or the main navigation. Look at this section first, fix it, and then move on to the next. Or the other approach is to go by problem area. So maybe you found lots of inputs without labels, or there are lots of issues with color contrast, so you might want to redesign your color palette. There are also some issues that might completely prevent access to a site from an assistive technology point. if you find any of those, you should definitely remove them first. But besides that, it doesn't really matter where you start, just start. So, we've learned a lot. We started testing with tools we were already familiar with. We're testing the real thing in a real browser. And we're improving our product one step at a time. Maybe we found and fixed all the issues that our automated testing could find. That's why we're doing. So there's still a long way to go. But maybe you're in a position where you found all the issues that automated testing can find. Congratulations. But where do you go from there? What now? Automated testing is great, and you should automate what you can. But it's no replacement for testing with real people, and for including real people in the design process. Look at it like this. Having automated testing in place makes room for you to address the really hard issues that require your time and focus. Alright, we're almost done. Let's recap the 6 points we talked about. I don't have them here. So, you can start with educating yourself and your team and your organization. And start with tools you already know well, so that there's a low barrier of entry for everyone. Test in as real circumstances as you possibly can. If you're developing a mobile app, test on the device. If you're testing a website, test in a real browser. Ideally, many real browsers. Make sure that the results are actionable. Just finding and keeping a catalog of issues doesn't really help anyone. And take it one issue at a time, and finally, go beyond the 30%. So I realize some of the examples I gave were quite technical, and I know not everybody there, so I don't have to and I think these points do not just apply to automated accessibility testing, they are just as relevant for designers or for when you want to establish an accessibility practice with user studies and audits. So, no more excuses. I'm aware that it can be really, really difficult to build an accessible product, no matter how motivated and passionate you are. But even if your organization makes it hard, or your lack of resources does, there's still a lot you can do. Thank you. Well, by default, X will tell you everything it finds. This 30% number comes from the way that the GDS set up the study. So they created a really, really bad, inaccessible website. So they created a really bad website and baked in a lot of accessibility issues. And they were absolutely aware of each of those issues. And then they ran a tool against it, like X and a couple of others. And those tools, they only found 30 of the issues that they make into the site. So once basically you can assume if you have satisfied X or TNON or whatever accessibility testing tool you're using, you're probably not even halfway there to having an actually accessible product. That's all it needs.
The rest, like 70% of issues, are they unique for each interface, or they're general, but they just involve some study?
They're likely unique for each interface. So, in the case of the study, this is an example. They used one site, they found 30% of the issues, 70% are issues on that site. There are probably some that that are not unique, that you might even be able to find with smarter tools. But I guess most of them are just particular to your interface. That's what makes it difficult, is why you need to test your interface with real people.
Okay, I'd like to start a question section. I'll try to choose the one that the most. I guess the hardest one is how do you get business on board? Because usually business tells, well, like those people are not our customers, but we invest the most money, so why would we care? And we have to invest into setting up all these processes that you described. And how do I challenge that?
I don't have a good answer to that. I think part of what I wanted to get along with this talk is that for a lot of things you don't have to ask for permission. That's why when I said use the tools you already know well, right? If your team already uses tools for testing, the only thing we added here was the bit on the right, and you don't need much permission to do that. Obviously, it's super helpful if either your immediate manager, and it's best if your company strategy is inclusive. But that's what I meant. You can do a lot of things without actually having so many resources. That's different for the 70% that's missing. Like if you need to go into doing real user research and user testing and accessibility audits, that's expensive and that might be difficult. But yeah, maybe some people in the room have more experience with convincing.
I just want to add something that you mentioned. How you want to convince business that we should do those optimizations with those people? And I just want to emphasize on those people because actually it's not about the specific group of people, it's about everyone. Because the thing that Joanna showed on those cards at the beginning is that even though most of the time we're talking about specific disability issues, actually the majorities are some temporary problems that every one of us can experience. So the idea is back to your presentation, is to educate first what is the use case and how all these accessibility improvements are like solving all these problems for everyone, not only for the specific group of people. And then naturally you can actually go through the process of choosing specific tools you can put in your development flow or design flow or the product development in general, and then hold like the topic of convincing someone will be very easy.
I agree that like on some things you can easily convince that it's working. For example, maybe color contrast or like size of the font is something that you can tell like yeah everyone like gets their lots of something and this is something right. But someone who lost their glasses didn't learn how to use the screen reader, for example, so we come up to that for that. So only very specific groups of people use screen readers, so why should we work on that? For me it's obvious, but like business is extra time and costs.
So again, this point goes to the temporary issues. So for example, if I lose temporary one of my eyes and I'm not able actually to see the screen properly, at that point I'll use the screen reader. So not only that, all the tools that are connected and using audio interfaces, you're actually communicating through a system really similar to the one that people using screen readers are using. So basically optimizing for those aspects, you're actually rolling up the inclusivity of your app, so to say. So it will reach more people by default. And the other point is that most of the time, especially with color contrast it's not, it's something that we as developers, if we educate our teams properly, it's something that should happen by default. It's not something that should happen like a huge effort for our teams to deliver those things. So for us, it's like one of those low-hanging fruits that we can actually tackle and be sure that at least we're taking care of those 30%. And for the rest of the 70%, of course, this is another topic that the business owners should be aware of, the specific cases, and also the manual testing with people.
There are challenges with that, like red color is not accessible with white, and but the market one is still right on better to white, even this red color. So the second question that I actually have is Yeah, so the second question I have is, well, I want to test with the real people. Like, first, where do I get them? And second is, how do I choose which ones to test on?
I might be the wrong person to ask. I've never done actual user research before. I'm a developer. We do have UX researchers at the research center. So I'm not qualified to answer that. I'm sorry. Maybe someone else in the audience?
Yeah, there are a couple of very popular security agencies that can do that for you professionally. I can recommend that also, which is not wanting something. But the idea is that you can reach those people and they can do the professional work for you, finding the proper user group that you would like to test with, and focus on specific issues that you're defining for them as a requirement. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that there are certain cases that you can do relatively easy and cheap in a cheap way. User testing by just selecting groups of people. And there are some techniques that you can use even in a normal notebook and just in a specific way. There are specific techniques about that. And then reach more people that can help you to test your interface or some changes in your website. But again, I can maybe share more details after the talks.
I think the question who you could or should include in your user research and testing is actually one of the hardest, because no matter how you decide, the decision will exclude someone else. But at some point you have to make an active decision. I'm not going to get around it.
So you can educate your organization in the right way. Where do you start? Because you can try to aim for the whole company, but I guess that's kind of impossible. So if you have to educate in the right way, how much do it?
Because it really depends on the structure and the size of the company. We need to have an internal company block, but we're only about 250 people. So it's a block that would reach everyone in theory. And the strategy that we're doing in regards to accessibility is that we write a post about once every 6 weeks about improvements we did in our design system with regards to accessibility. So here we improve the icons and now choose if they're decorative or if they're actually handmade. Here we improve the way that tooltips are marked. Just doing that over and over again is one way to get the word out. I agree it's probably not the most direct. It's just triggering some knowledge here and there might help. And in terms of, for us, just the front-end engineering organization, work system where we do workshops across the whole organization. And then again, we're not Microsoft, so the number of people we need to reach with that is maybe 15 to 20 front-end developers. So it's probably easier. But I would suggest start at your team and then just go around. So a team that you have a lot of touch points with. And maybe find a sponsor, someone who is more senior than you, or has more, more impact across the whole organization. And yeah, exactly. Basically get them on board. Maybe that helps. Can you repeat that, please?
Creating awareness first, and then hopefully the course of action.
I'd say creating awareness and then do the action as much as I can.
That's it. Thank you, team. Thank you for the talk.